And now, a reasonable conversation with Pastor Randy Morrison.
Well, welcome to A Reasonable Conversation. My name is Pastor Tyrone Morrison, and I'm here with my wife, DeRelle Morrison. And this month, we have a privilege and opportunity to specifically be talking about marriage and moving from surviving to thriving in marriage. And I think that's so important to talk about, specifically because it seems like so many couples or aspiring to be couples just are having a tough time during this pandemic.
Yes, that's true. I totally agree. I think a lot of people are struggling right now in terms of their marriage relationships. And here at Speak the Word Church, we want to focus on that and be able to help couples get the help that they need. And so, yes, we are going to talk about from surviving to thriving. And today we have some special guests here. We have a married couple in our church. I'm going to introduce them as Phil and Jen Geertsema. Welcome today to our show. And I just want to kind of open up and talk about this topic of surviving to thriving. Tell us a little bit, first of all, how you guys, started dating. How did you guys find each other in, to lead to that place of marriage?
Yeah, thanks guys so much for having us. We're looking forward to sharing what's made our marriage wonderful, and hopefully it'll help other people as well. So we actually met at a work conference. I lived in Mankato, I was going to college, and Jen lived up here. And we met at a work conference, and I thought she was very good looking. And after the conference, we ended up sitting across from each other, and we were chatting, and we obviously parted ways. And then, do you want to continue?
My manager at the time was one of your friends, so you guys were talking, and then kind of an embarrassing story, but I had mentioned to her that I thought he was good looking, and I wanted to know if he was single. And so she didn't know, so I think she texted you, and I can't remember what you said. You said, let her know I'm single or something like that. So we ended up seeing each other a couple more times through these regional meetings, and we weren't really talking, and we'd say hi if we'd pass one another. But I just all of a sudden got the umption to go into my manager's phone while she was in a meeting and find his phone number. Just kind of wanted to do it myself. Let's get the ball rolling and see if this goes anywhere. So I think it was that night I texted him. Or no, I called you, and it went to voicemail, and I left a message. And then the number that I called was calling me back, and I was too chicken to answer it, so I let it go to voicemail, and I listened to the voicemail, and it was his mom. And she left me a message saying, you're probably trying to reach Phil. This is his old phone number. I'll give you his new phone number. So I called that phone, and we ended up talking the whole night. So
Cool.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, and our first date was right up there. Up in the balcony here at church.
Yeah, he came down
here at church.
He came down from Mankato on a Sunday and went to church with me. I was living with Allie and Han, and he came to the apartment, picked me up, and we went to church and sat up there and went out to lunch with my mom after service.
We had a three-way date, me and Jen and her mom. It was fun. It was great.
Her mom right away.
Right. Yeah.
Awesome. That's great. That's a great story. So how long ago was that?
Oh my gosh.
That
How long have you
was
been married?
November of 2016.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
And so then we dated for, I'm really good at math too, but no, November of 2006. Sorry, 2016.
I was going to say, that sounds a little wrong.
2006, yep. And then we dated for a few years, and we got married in
2009?
2009, yeah.
June 2009.
So it'll be...
So it was 11 and a half years.
11 and a half
I know how
years.
long we've been married.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Good to know, right? Don't forget that one.
Yeah. And her birthday is on our anniversary, so I'm either good or I'm really in trouble.
Yeah, I told him,
One or
I
the other.
said, having our wedding on my birthday doesn't give you, lenient towards a gift you would
It's
give
still
me.
two gifts.
Yeah,
It's
it's
not
still
one.
my birthday
It's still
and
two
our
gifts.
wedding. It's not together.
That is so awesome. That is
Yeah.
so awesome. So tell a little bit about what that dating process was like for you. Obviously, we know that you came to the house of God, which is the key step in terms of, dating. But like, were there any things that you went through in terms of the process of dating, and how did that really go for you?
You know, it's funny because growing up, I always knew that I wanted to. So I grew up in a house where we were Christians, but we weren't born again. I don't know if that really makes sense,
Yeah.
but like we went to church, and I had a little bit of a relationship with Jesus, but not.
It was more going through the motions.
Right, it was kind of going through the motions. And I knew that when I got married, I wanted to be married to someone who was a Christian and was born again. And so that was obviously really, appealing right away. What's actually kind of funny, and I just thought about this last night, is that I remember that time, and I wasn't really even open to being in a relationship at that point. I'd been in a couple of relationships, and it wasn't great, and I just wanted time to be alone. But it's kind of funny how God's timing is quite a bit different than our timing. And like, she showed up and she called that day, and I kind of had gotten to know her a little bit through these other conversations that she'd had. And I was like, okay, well, maybe, I'll be open to it. So, I was definitely ready when we started talking. And I think it helped that, I think it really helped that we were actually separated a little bit, because we lived an hour and a half away, and so we talked a lot over the phone. And I think that might be something that really helped us, is that we were able to talk a lot over the phone, rather than doing some going out and doing other things. Is like, we got to know each other really well by talking over the phone, rather than just being in person all the time. So I think that's one thing that actually probably helped. Obviously, we wished that we could have seen each other every day, but it was like we'd see each other on the weekends, and that was about it. Yeah.
I find it interesting that you say that, because it seems like cohabitation, obviously for many people, a lot of people are cohabiting, but you're saying that not living together actually helped you guys
It brought in the communication.
Brought in the communication, right? And
just to kind of piggyback off of that, just the space, the distance in terms of not being, consistently under each other all of the time. I think sometimes people have that ideology, we're in love, we found each other, let's like sit right next to each other, 24/7, 365, where you're saying like, there was space, there was an hour and a half, we talked, on the phone, and that kind of helped you grow closer in a sense,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's
and
awesome.
it's funny that through this conversation, I'm just kind of realizing that the other relationships I had, like, we had seen each other almost every single day, and sometimes it just doesn't work, because you're two individuals and you're trying to get to know each other, and so I think that was a big deal. And then one other thing that I've heard a lot is I'm a huge Disney fan, as I know you guys are, and I think there's an I don't know if it's a stereotype, I don't know what the best word for it is, but I think a lot of people are looking for like Mr. Right or Miss Right. It's like, I'm looking for this specific person. And one thing that I learned a long time ago is like, I'm not probably going to find the perfect person, but I can try to be the best version of myself that I can be, because as we're raising kids, and we want to reflect Jesus. And I find that if I go out and I reflect Jesus, then other people reflect Jesus to me. But if I go out and I'm kind of self-serving and I'm arrogant and I'm other kind of negative qualities that other people are kind of negative, those same qualities towards me. So I think that we were both good at being good people before we found each other, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I wasn't necessarily going and looking for someone who is perfect, while I myself, obviously we're all flawed, but I was trying to be the best version of myself, while going out and finding someone else who is also trying to be the best version of herself, if that makes sense.
I think it's important to love yourself and know yourself in God before you hook yourself up with somebody just to do it.
Yeah.
It's like, God's got someone out there for you, and if he wants you guys together, it's going to happen no matter what. But you yourself have to be prepared for that relationship and love yourself and put God first. And then he'll bring somebody in to help you along that path.
I think that's so important for especially single people to understand. This is probably one of the most significant steps that you can have before you get involved with somebody else or get married is understanding who you are and understanding how to love yourself. Because if you don't love yourself and have a good self identity or self-perception, you know, the Bible says love others as you love yourself. So it's like you just said, it's so important for people to learn how to just, you get me time.
Right.
You know,
Right.
the moment you say I do, they're always there.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And it's important. And even when you're married, that's another thing is, side note, it's important to build in that time too, but for self.
Well,
you
yeah,
can't lose
you're
who
like,
you are.
what's that? Iron sharpens iron. So
Yeah.
you want to have the right partner. So you have to be yourself and love yourself first. And your partner has to do the same thing.
Yes.
So, yeah.
And I think you find so many people who are, you know, they get in a relationship and they try to almost be someone else, and then you get married being someone else, and then you try to go back to being yourself, and it doesn't work. And that was, you know, one of the best pieces of advice that I had after I had my previous girlfriend before Jen was someone said maybe you should just take like a year off, just like don't have any girlfriends, just because like I didn't know who I was yet. I was 20 years old and I didn't have a lot of self-esteem, and I didn't really know exactly who I was. And you know, it was a great use of that year just to kind of find who I was and what I wanted, and to become my own person rather than, you know, just going from one relationship to another relationship to another relationship. It gave me a really good chance to kind of work on myself, because I found that in every single one of my, not that I had a lot, but a couple of relationships, like the issues with those relationships were the same in every one. I was like, well, that girl's wrong because of this issue, and that girl's wrong because of this issue. And then like a year later, I was like, no, it was me that was wrong, and it wasn't necessarily them. So it gave that space, definitely gave me some good time to work on me.
Yeah.
So what was that working on you like look like? What is that setting goals for what you want to do? And I think that it's so important for couples to have goals, but that also means you got to have your own goal and what that vision is, you know, for your life and so on and so forth. So
yeah, so probably about 6 months before I met Jen at this same job that we had worked at called Cutco Knives. She probably went and sold some of you guys that are listening some Cutco Knives, so thank you for buying those from Jen. But at that company, they were invested in building people, not just building employees, if that makes sense. So one of the speeches that I had heard was they had challenged us to go and write down your goals and write down the list of your dreams and things you wanted to do and things you wanted to accomplish. And I take people at where I work now at ADP, I take people through that every year because it's had such an impact on me. Where, you know, before, as I mentioned, we got married, or before we met, I knew that I wanted to, you know, marry a girl who was a Christian and, you know, different things like that. But when I went through my goals and my dreams, and I kind of wrote out, like, I want to be a father, and I don't want to just be a good dad, but I want to be a great father. Yeah. And, you know, I wrote down, you know, the kind of a dad that I wanted to be and the type of a husband that I wanted to be. And that really helped me clarify, okay, well, if I want a great wife, then I need to have these specific qualities as a husband. And that really, really helped when I was trying to kind of find myself. Because it's, you know, if you want to go on vacation, you can't just get in your car and start driving and say, oh man, we wound up at this great destination, right?
Right.
If you're going on vacation, like, you got to know where you're going, you got to plan it out. You know, if you're going to drive, there's always roadblocks and there's different ways to get there, and maybe you have to take a right here instead of taking a left. But you know, so it didn't happen exactly how I wanted to, but, you know, 15, 16 years later now, it's better than I ever could have imagined. And the road is sometimes the journey is just as fun as the destination. And I don't think that we've arrived at any means, but we've really, really enjoyed the journey. But also we're very aware of what that destination is going to be.
We're still learning too. It's like, it's continual learning from each other, and, you know, we're working towards a goal, so you're constantly, you know, grinding and, you know, sharpening each other and learning, but like he said before, you're working together, not against each other. So.
Jen, tell us a little bit more about how you grew up, in a sense. You know, Phil said, you know, you didn't grow up in a real, like, Christian family, or you did, but it wasn't as, like, born again. But for you, like, what was that experience like in terms of, you know, finding Phil?
I grew up in a Christian. I've been going to Speak the Word church since I was a baby. So I grew up in a Christian home, like pure Christian home, and was raised with the values and goals of how to be married, and, you know, the steps on how to do it and the right way to do it. And so Phil was my first interest. Like, you know, there was boys at high school that I thought were cute, but it never lasted. It always ended, and there just wasn't anything there. And so when I was working for his friend, or my manager, like, it just, like, I wasn't looking for a relationship. That wasn't my goal to work there. I was, you know, living and trying to make some money so I could go places and do things, and it just happened. And so, yeah, I don't know, like,
that's great.
you know, it just happened. You just follow the path that God has for you, and eventually, you know, you're going to run into somebody that piques your interest.
Follow the path.
Yeah.
I think that's such a important thing for people to understand, is that path that God has for you. Because the passage I think about was obviously Adam and Eve, and God he says, I made a helper suitable for you.
Right.
You know, and notice how God brought them together. And Adam had a job. He had a job. I mean, he was working.
Right.
You know.
Right.
But it's following what that path is. I think that, like you guys said, that's so important for people.
Yeah.
For people to understand, regardless of where you are in the spectrum of dating or you're married, what is that path? What does that path look like? What is that goal?
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah.
Tell us how you proposed. How did that go? Like, how was the wedding experience and finding each other and getting through all that?
Yeah, so one of my best friends, his name is Ben Peterson, and we had been dating for a while, and I knew that she was the one I wanted to marry. I just, he had kind of given me a push to propose, because he was actually getting deployed to Afghanistan, and he said, hey, it would be really cool if you proposed before then. So, and he's a Christian, and sometimes, you need those people around you who kind of know what's best for you. He's like, dude, like, she's a keeper, and she is the one. Like, you need to get this kind of wrapped up before, something else, not that anything would have happened, but you just never know. And he was like, hey, I'd really like to, I know you guys are meant for each other, so you need to propose before I go to Afghanistan. I think we had a couple months yet before he was going to leave. And so we actually, the three of us, all went on vacation to Daytona Beach. So it was a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun with him. And this was, it had to have been 2 weeks before he left, because it was right before he left. And so one morning, I got up and walked her out to the beach. It was supposed to be at sunrise, but we had slept in a little bit. So when I went to get her, she was like, hey, do you want to go for a walk? And I was really awkward about it. It was like, so she's like, so what's going on? Like, I'm terrible at secrets, which is probably a good thing. So if anybody's out there who needs a secret, don't come to me, because I'm not the person to keep it. But yeah, we had walked out to the beach, and I'd proposed there.
I think it was like misty or foggy. Like, it wasn't clear.
Misty, yeah. So we wouldn't have seen the sunrise anyway. So it wouldn't have mattered. But yeah.
So I was standing facing the ocean, watching it, and he was behind me. And for a while, so I finally turned around to figure out what the heck he was doing.
And Ben was supposed to be taking a picture of us, but he had fallen back asleep. So I was waiting for him to come out onto the balcony, but that didn't happen. So he had fallen back asleep. Okay. So he was trustworthy in one area, but not in another. But I guess probably if I were to choose one of the two, the challenging me to propose was probably the better option.
You wrote "Marry Me" in the sand, and I turned around.
Oh. That sounds like me. Cut that out.
He was on his knee with a message in the sand and asked me.
Yep.
How romantic.
Yes, very romantic. So how did the wedding go? Like, did that go okay? Were there any
Yeah, I
challenges?
hope so. It was a blur.
You made it down the way, right?
It
Down the aisle.
honestly is.
It's like
yeah.
the only thing I can remember is if I actually talk to you, like, it just stops and then it just goes like this. It's like a blur. So all the worry that you have going into a marriage or planning the wedding is like, don't stress it. It's like once you get to that point, it's just all about you two.
Yeah.
So everything else just kind of works itself out. And you have all those people who care for you, and if something goes wrong, let them take care of it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I think we got two really good pieces of advice, and I think Jen had mentioned this earlier, but we've always been really good about going out and seeking ways to improve. And so, two pieces of advice that we got for our wedding that I would definitely give to other people are: number one was it's about you two. I think a lot of people have gotten married and they end up spending the whole entire day apart. Oh well, this person needs this person needs this, and all those kind of things. And so that was a really good piece of advice because we were, literally together at the hip the entire day. So much so that someone said, "Hey, you should probably come up and dance with these other people because you've kind of." It's like, I'm sorry, I'm married. I'm with her today. If they need to come ask me, right? I'm here, but we're together, right? Which has kind of been the way for the rest of our lives. We're just attached at the hip and we really enjoy each other. So that was one is spend that time together. Someone also said go and spend a minute or two or a couple minutes away, which was when we kind of walked away and did our own thing and talked for a little bit. So that was kind of fun. And then the next thing that I think was also really good was you can only plan so much until you get to the day. Something bad's going to happen. Something's going to happen. And so just if something does happen that's not great at the wedding, it's there's literally nothing you can do about it. You can let it wreck the entire day, or you can just kind of keep going on. And that's such a great analogy for life too. Stuff is going to happen. Marriage isn't easy. COVID, something like that is eventually going to happen. You just have to. One of the things that obviously I help with the teens, and one of the things I try to teach them is I think there's two ways to. You can either respond positively or you can react negatively. The instant that COVID hit, I think a lot of people reacted really negatively, whether it was, whether with work or personal or whatever, but a lot of people reacted negatively, and then there was a lot of people that responded positively. And what's fun about sports is, the blowouts are never fun. If it's 41-0, it's not really that much fun. But if it's 21-21, going into the last 3 minutes, that's what's really fun, right? So it's because of that adversity that sometimes makes things fun. And I'm not saying that COVID's fun, but can you take something like that? Can you take something bad that happened and not blow up over it? Or how can you improve? And how can you learn and how can you get better?
It's just a different way of looking at it.
Yeah. Oh,
It's it's got probably something to do with how you were raised. How do you look at situations that are going to affect you, and how are you going to handle those situations? And he's more oh, it's okay, honey. Just God will take care of it. Just let it roll off your back. And I'm more passionate. We're I have to talk about it. I have to say something. And so we kind of balance each other out. We're hey, just calm down. And, sometimes I tell him that he needs to say something. And so it's you don't know who you are. Like Pastor says, you don't know who you are until you get into hot water. And I think we're all in hot water right now. So it's what are you going to do? How are you going to take this situation and make it, peaceful? And you can't do anything about it. So let's just make it peaceful and just live.
Yeah. I think that's so important because, and I'm kind of just elaborate on what you guys are already saying here. It's how you react, because there's not a lot of good reaction with a lot of people that since COVID has happened. It's caused people to go home and really deal with a lot of stuff that they've already had
you can't
going
run
on.
from your demons.
You can't run from it. But there's a quote that says that life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you respond to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's, like you guys are saying, that's just so important. How's your attitude
Right.
with this? So how have you guys been doing with COVID? How,
We've
since the lockdowns have happened? And
I think we've been doing really good, actually. Like with the school situation, like my kids are at home and I'm homeschooling them. I don't like to do it, but I'm not going to sit there and, talk negative about it in front of my kids. I don't want them to have that attitude.
Yeah.
So we just make the best that we can. And some days are better than others. And
How old are the kids? What age?
Emery just turned 8, and Ella will turn 6 in a couple weeks.
Okay.
yeah.
Yep.
So elementary.
So, yeah, and he's working from home. He's upstairs, so he's got his own space, and it works for us. I mean, COVID has actually been a blessing for us because it kind of put us in the home together, and we've been actually had conversations where we're like, okay, let's ditch the phone when you're off of work so we can unplug and be together, and just having better attitudes and like not taking anything for granted. Realizing that you don't need to be out and about to feel better about yourself, and it's been really good for us.
That's good.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Are there any areas that you think, in terms of the entire time frame that you've been married, that are like surviving or challenging areas that you have overcome, or you're just still kind of, figuring those things out? What topics would those be?
I would say that one would probably be where she had kind of touched on this a little bit ago, but I'm a little bit more kind of reserved and I'm not that great at sharing my feelings. And then she's a little bit more, in your words, passionate. So I think we've learned to kind of even each other out a little bit. So I think it just takes time to get to know your partner, and like I know kind of, and I think one thing that I'm trying to find the best way to say this, but I think a lot of people will expect their spouse to read their mind, and I think that's really unfair.
Yeah.
And I think that there might have been a couple times that I had said to her, well, like, can't you just read my mind? Or, it's like I thought that. It's like, we're married now. You're a psychic, right? You can literally read my mind and know what's going on. So I think it's unfair for people to expect that. But one of Jen's big things is, hey, we just have to always have open communication. So, if she's feeling something, she's free to tell me. We don't judge each other. It's like, hey, this is what we're feeling. Like, sometimes it's like, I don't even need a solution. It's just, hey, here's what I'm feeling. Here's what is bugging me.
Sometimes you just need to talk.
Yeah.
You just need to talk about what's bugging you. And it doesn't have to be a solution for it. It's just the conversation, the intimacy between your partner, just that knowing that they're there for you, to hear what you got to say.
Yeah.
Like, we're kind of going through something personal right now, and we're getting to know each other a lot better because we have to communicate. For me, it's just, I can't keep stuff, not say anything and keep it bottled down. That's not who I am. That's not how I was raised. And like, I have to know what he's thinking, what he's feeling, and if this is bugging him, because I do care about that. But, it's both of our decisions on what's happening that we need to move forward.
Yeah.
How do you incorporate the Lord into the communication and how, into your marriage? How is God involved in that?
Yeah, so I think back to your, have we ever gone through areas where we're just surviving? I think one of the reasons why we haven't had a lot of spots where we're surviving is that I think our faith is very, very great, and we realize that, hey, whether things are kind of going down or they're going uphill or whatever the case is, like, we do have a faith and we're grounded in the faith. And because of that, like, it doesn't really matter what's going around outside or in the world or, whatever. It's not going to really affect us that much that we're going to...
Enough to steal our joy.
Enough to steal our joy, exactly.
And we got our kids to think about. It's not just us in this family. It's our kids. And, like, kids are like sponges. They're going to suck up everything, and they see how you react to things, and you got to pay attention to. You're more aware of how you handle situations. So.
Yeah. But back to your question about faith, I think it's like Jen just said, the kids are like sponges, and so there's only so much you can tell them before you actually have to do it. Like you can say, hey, you need to pray all day long, but until you actually start praying is when they actually start praying as well, I think. So, we like wake up every morning, and now that, it's fun now because I would read the Bible to them, which I thoroughly enjoy. But now, like, Emery will read like the beginner's Bible, and Ella will sit next to him, and it's just the cutest thing in the world. But it's like we're really intentional about taking time like that to spend with God. Like, we're reading the Bible every morning. And, sometimes we're like anybody else. Sometimes, like, we slept in, or one of the kids got up at night, and we're going to be rushing, but still we take like our 5 minutes or 10 minutes at least to read. And when the kids were a little bit smaller, like we would pray before we eat. And now it's fun to kind of, hey, whose turn is it to pray tonight? And I think one of the coolest things is they will actually fight over whose turn it is to pray. I mean, that's getting kind of fun.
I wouldn't call it fighting, but they're like,
I think it's my. Like they'll both say it's my turn. So that's kind of fun.
They want to do it.
They want
Exactly. But they wouldn't want to do it if we were just telling them to do it. Right. It's like, hey, go clean your room, but we're not going to clean our room. Like, our room's a mess, but you have to clean your room. Like, it doesn't work our way. Our room is clean, thus you guys need to clean your room. We pray, thus you need to pray. We read our Bible, you need to read your Bible. One of the, and I have it written down, but one of the, the golden rule, I think it's in John, do unto others as you would want them to do unto you. I think that's great, and we've, I think, taken it a step farther. Like, we do unto our kids as we want our kids to do unto others.
Unto society when they're older.
Right, yeah. Right. And so how we treat our kids, we want them to treat others. And how I treat Jen, that is how I expect my kids to treat Jen. Because I remember growing up, and I would see, my parents didn't, but I would see parents smoke. Like, as they're puffing on a cigarette, they say, don't you dare do this. It's like, well, what are you going to listen to? What we're actually doing or what we're saying? Like, I think isn't that called a hypocrite? Really I think that's what that's called. So we're pretty good at treating each other. I want my kids to respect Jen, so I have to respect Jen. I want my kids, and not that I'm forced to, but that sounded really bad. It's like I'm forced to. Like, I respect Jen anyway, but obviously I want my kids to respect Jen. But I want my kids to be loving and kind and generous. So then I have to be loving and kind and generous, and that comes back to reflecting Jesus. I think if we just go out and if we reflect Jesus, I know you both know who Andy Stanley is. One of his kind of catchphrases is, what does love require of the situation? I think if you read through the New Testament, really at almost any time in the New Testament, you see Jesus up against a situation, and you would ask, what would love require of the situation? And Jesus' response was always love. Right? He responded with love, and that's how we try to, I think, teach our kids and raise our kids with love. And it's love first, and then let's see what love requires of the situation.
It's love others as you love yourself. And I think the world needs to hear that right now. It's loving others as you love yourself. I mean, you want to be respected, you got to respect other people.
Right.
You gotta, so yeah. And I think that's so important with the model that you guys are studying for your kids, because they will replicate what they see.
Right.
Completely.
In the world, And you said, you want your kids treating Jen the way you want them to be treated. You have a daughter, right? So no other man that comes in your life is going to treat you any other way than you see me treating your mama, or I treat you.
Right.
So, or how your brother should treat you.
Awesome. Exactly.
Yeah.
So tell us about some areas where you think you are just thriving. Like, if you could just kind of say, yeah, we do that kind of well, we just feel like we're on top of that. What are those areas like for you?
Go ahead.
Oh,
We're
gosh.
very humble, so we can't think of anything. No, I'm kidding.
I think, gosh, I don't know, like, I think we're good. Like, it's like we know what we want to, like, as far as discipline, raising our kids, how we want them to treat people, how we treat ourselves. You know, it's just communication. It's just talking about your goals and what you want, and make sure that you're on the same page and you're, you know, along with God's plan. And I don't know, I just, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think, you know, again, one of the other things I teach the teens is, you know, wisdom is doing today what is best for the future.
Yeah.
I think we are, if I can brag for a second,
Yeah,
I think we're
go for it.
really good at focusing on the future, not just what I want right now. Which is called, you know, immediate gratification or delaying gratification, right? We're pretty good at delaying gratification. And, you know, I know that our future is going to be great because we are delaying gratification. And I think that's one thing that we're pretty good at. You know, I love a buffet, but I can only take so much, right?
Yeah.
And that's immediate gratification. And, you know, if you overindulge at a buffet, then you're going to be feeling it like 10 minutes later, right? But if you can go through this life, and if you can go through life thinking, okay, well, is this better for me now, or is this what I want now, or is this better for us for our future? I think that's one of the reasons that we're thriving a lot is because we're continually asking that. It's not just, oh, well, I really want this now, and it's just all about me, and I'm only going to focus on what I want. It's, okay, well, what's better for Jen if I do this now? What's better for the kids if I do this now? And then we can then make a decision about, is it, okay, do we take the left fork or do we take the right fork? Because, you know, we know where we're going and we know what is probably the best thing to do right now based on, you know, where we want to end
Right,
up.
especially now, I think COVID's brought us closer as far as, you know, talking to yourself like that. Like, is this best for us right now or for my family? You know, what matters most right now? So,
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like you guys are just doing so well and just have this great relationship. Share a little bit more about the people that are around you, family, friends. How have they supported your marriage relationship, and how important is that to have that type of support, in your opinion?
that's very important to me.
Yeah, I completely agree. I know that Pastor Randy has said this quite a few times that, you know, you are, and I've heard other people say it too, but basically you're about the average of the 5 people you hang around with. So I would hope that this would be a compliment to Pastor Randy, but obviously she grew up under him. I've been listening to him now for 16 years, and our hope would be that if you listen to one of Pastor Randy's sermons and then look at our life, like that's how we live our lives. And obviously now under you too, it's like if you guys say something, we try to live that. So, and hopefully again, it's a compliment to the people that we hang around with, that we reflect those people.
Yeah.
And so you can tell by the people that we are, who the people are that we hang around with. And if we were hanging out with other people, we would probably reflect those people
You know,
as well.
if you want to be a fool, hang around with the fools.
Yeah.
If you want to be wise, hang around the wise.
Yeah.
And it's not that hard, but people miss it, you know, just for gratification or for the fun of it or whatever. But it's true. It's like you have to have a support system, like a godly support system for you and your partner, because there is no rule book on how to raise kids. So sometimes you need help. And I think my parents are a big impact on us because, you know, they live close to us and they are Christians themselves, so it's easy for us to be like, hey, what would you do in this situation? Or even I can remember some stuff that they've done teaching me. So it's just having them support. And, you know, the kids love spending time with them and going over there and sleeping over, and sometimes they don't even want to come home, like, you know, and that's great. I love seeing that relationship grow with them and the grandkids, and just, I know that they have the morals and the values that we have, so I'm more comfortable leaving them with them because I know nothing's going to be said or done that shouldn't be. So, and then we have, friends in church that we hang out with and have our own time with, and, we'll set play dates with their kids, and so a support system's really important.
Yeah, completely agree.
Yeah. Was there ever an issue or anything where, you had to find out as a couple, like, let's not hang around, those people because they're like impacting our relationship or anything like that? Or you kind of came into agreement where you're like, no, we're not going down that path?
I think there have been people that we have done things with less because they're not the exact role model that we want for our kids.
Right.
And again, that doesn't mean that like in our case, like with a lot of people, once we got married, it was like, okay, well, that's not the type of people we want to hang out with anymore. We need to hang out with other people. And then some people, it's like, hey, we'll still hang out with them, but maybe not as much. So I think it's on a person-to-person or case-by-case basis. So you can't just say we don't hang out with anybody who's not Christians, because I don't think that's fair either. Jesus tended to hang out with people that weren't necessarily following his life views. So you can't just push everybody to the side. Yeah. But I think it's also really important that if you are with someone like that, that you know who you are and you're comfortable in who you are. And I think that there's almost two different kinds of relationships that you can have. You can have the Christian relationship where it's like if we're with you guys, like we want to suck in what you guys have, right? Mm-hmm. And then when you're maybe in more of a secular environment, let's say you're at work or whatever the case is, then it's okay. Well, I want to go out and be the example. And maybe I don't even have to preach about my feelings and my faith and stuff like that. But if I can just go out and reflect Jesus, but I don't want to suck in the stuff that comes from all that. We were talking about social media and how I'm not really on social media anymore because you go out there and it's just negative, mm-hmm. and it's like I just don't feel the need to go around that. So I think it's just that you have to be careful on who you hang out with and what you allow into your mind and into your soul when you're out there with other people.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Did you have?
Well, I was just going to say, it says don't be unequally yoked with unbelievers, and it's just the fact that the world right now is so negative and so focused on spreading that. It's like we've decided that we don't even turn the news on because, we've seen people who watch that, and that's all they can talk about. And we're like, okay, if you're going to come into this house, we don't want you to talk about it because we don't want to hear about it. And it's not like we're ignoring COVID, but it's just like this is a different atmosphere. This is God's house in our house, and if you're going to come in here, we want you to have a happy spirit. Don't bring your negativeness on us, and
because that affects your environment.
And don't bring your fear on us, and it's toxic. So it's just we've had to take a break from a couple people just because of that. So.
I just think that's so beautiful that you are protecting your environment. You're actually monitoring who's coming in your door and what's on them in terms of their spirit, to say you're not bringing that into our home. Because we've done so much to build this relationship to get us to this place. We're actually protective of that. So I think that's great.
And it does intensify, I think, when you have kids, because you have that protectiveness over them. And like when I was being raised, my mom would always say, you are who you hang around, and don't be unequally yoked with strangers. And I always was like, okay, Mom. And now I get it. Like, I have my own kids, and I'm like, okay, if you're going to come into our house, I don't want them hearing that. You're going to speak life into our house, not fear, and we're not going to be a part of spreading that. So we've talked about that too.
So awesome. That's awesome.
Great.
Tell us what you do for fun as a couple. Like when you get away from the kids, tell us about vacation life. How do you plan for that? Any advice for these couples out here who are struggling that don't know how to spend time together?
Right.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple things that we do, but I think you just have to find what works really well for you. We've always enjoyed going on vacations, and now that we have kids, other than maybe when Emery and Ella were really small, we try to go on one vacation, just us two, and then maybe one or two, hopefully, with the kiddos. But I think it's important to look forward to just time together. And so, we'll have our monthly game nights with our friends, which is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And there'll be sometimes we'll just go and drop off the kids at her parents' house, and we'll just sit on the couch and
Just
watch
hang
some
out.
TV
Yeah.
and play games just one-on-one. And I think it's just, but that's again
So you
what
still
we
date.
enjoy, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
We're
Yeah.
still
Right.
Yeah.
having time
Stop dating.
together.
Right. Yeah. We still date and hold hands when before when we would go out to we still hold hands, but like before COVID when we would go out to eat, like it's sometimes kind of fun to just sit next to each other, like in a 4-person booth. Like sometimes we'll sit aside, but sometimes like right next to each other. And so yeah, just dating and opening the door and just little things like that.
Yeah.
And sometimes just go and spend a night in a hotel, even if it's just in downtown Minneapolis, and we just watch TV from the hotel room instead of at home. But I think it's just important that what you enjoy doing with each other.
Yeah, and making the time for it.
Right, and being very intentional about, hey, we're going to spend this time together. I think, again, it's really hard when you've got really little kids, because maybe sometimes you can't do that for a little while. But now for 5 or 6 years now, probably like once a month. And again, we're very blessed with grandparents who are close, who are willing to take the kids. But once a month, we're very intentional about, hey, let's go and let's do something ourselves. So yeah, it's always something to look forward to.
That's great.
That is awesome. I
That's
like
great.
that once a month, like you're intentional about it. Like it's on the calendar. Like
Yeah.
there's no like taking it off.
This is mommy daddy day.
Yeah,
Go
yeah,
away.
yeah.
It's usually with
Yeah.
our game night, and we're like all pepped up for it.
Right,
And, like,
yeah.
smack talking each other. and-
Yeah, right, yeah. Get the smack talk, and we get some games in early
See,
before we
she's
go.
competitive.
Yeah.
You can't tell. You can't. Yeah.
That is just so awesome. I just think that's so great. Tell us a little bit more about like your work-life balance in the sense of like obviously now you're at home, through the pandemic, but prior to that, were you working at home or, with the kids, or how did that all balance out for you in terms of child rearing and marriage? And
Right. I've been at home with the kids ever since Emery was born.
Okay.
So
Yeah, and then
that's my work.
That's your work. Okay.
right.
Yeah.
And then pre-COVID, I would leave at whenever we go and drop off Emery at school, and then I'd come home at probably 4:30, something around that. I've got some pretty awesome hours.
And we talked about like before the kids were born, like what hours you should be working, and when you come home to be home, and leave your work stuff at in the car. Just don't bring it in the house, stuff like that. So that kind of helped.
Wow.
Yeah.
So there are actual conversations you're saying that you had about like how
Yeah.
this is going
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
look.
So
like, tell me
when-
more about that, because some couples don't like do that at all.
Right, completely. So when we obviously met selling Cutco, and then she had stopped, I had continued selling, and
I retired.
she retired, right? And so what was actually kind of funny is she would every once in a while, and it wasn't a sales ploy, it was just because we wanted to spend time together. When we were dating, she would actually come with me on my Cutco sales appointments. And so we were dating, or we were even engaged at that point. And like she had mentioned earlier that we've always been pretty good about learning and growing and improving and stuff like that. And it's funny that we would go, and most of my clients at that point were probably 40 to 60. So usually they had older kids, maybe high school or maybe in college or out of college. And we would ask about how they raise their kids and stuff like that, because we were engaged and we wanted to have kids, and what would you and what would you suggest? And not one of them ever said, "Gosh, I really wish I would have worked more." If I were to go back, man, I would have forgotten about the kids. And, like, nobody ever said that, right? Like every single one, it was, man, if I could go back, I would have spent more time with my kids.
That's all right, man. Take your time.
Can we do a commercial break real quick?
Take the time you need.
Take your
Yeah,
time,
this is
man.
real. This is authentic. So.
Thank you.
So we just talked about like him, because you have dads who, think that they have to provide for their kids so much that they're working all these hours, and that's not really what we wanted. So we made sure our finances were set and our working hours were set. And he's been offered job like management and stuff where it would apply more work and more mental work and also more hours. And we just didn't want to do that, especially when the kids are young. You want to be around for things that happen with them. And so we just talked about how important that is to us and just made sure that would be available for us when we were going to have kids. Like we were able to do that. So
Yeah,
That's important.
thank you.
I just
I'm back.
think, yeah, no problem. I mean, I just think that's so beautiful to actually, like I said, have that conversation, with each other. So many people just jump into marriage, they're not communicating, they just have the kids, and it's just kind of like, what do we do, But it's like, you guys have this plan, this vision to say, okay, I'm going to work, I'm going to stay at home, and this is how it's going to go. And it's like, you've held that vision throughout your relationship, and it's just like, you're so in agreement about it. You know what I mean? And it's just like couples go through things, give or take, we all do.
Yeah.
But it's just like, I just get this sense of just strong agreement about like, this is where we're at in the process, regardless of like the struggles. How important is it to have that agreement?
It's unbelievably important. And you know what? I even remember when we were dating before we were engaged, obviously, and she knew at that point that she wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. And so I knew, way before we were even married that, hey, that's kind of what she wanted. Like, I know other people who, like, they don't find out, or like the wife didn't tell the husband until they were pregnant, like, hey, I'd like to be a stay-at-home mom. It's like, well, you should have told me that like 4 years ago. So it was really good that I knew that before then, because, I could kind of plan for that. Obviously not everything's about finances, but finances are relatively important. So as like I knew that by the time that we got pregnant, she got pregnant, that, I needed to be at a certain point and we needed to be able to do certain things. And so we were really good about, communicating that up front. Like we had like expectations of, okay, well, moving forward, it's, Phil's going to take care of the money thing, and, we each kind of share our own load. So it's just been unbelievably important that, again, back to the thing where we're kind of going in the same direction. Like we're on the same boat. We know where we're going. We're going in this direction. And some opportunities, like she mentioned, like the promotions or stuff like that, it's like that would be more of a this direction thing. We need to stay going in this direction. So I can't express enough how important it is just to be on the same page and to be open about all that.
Yeah. We kind of made sure that we were financially set to have kids and be able to have me stay at home with them, because that was my goal. So we just didn't, get married and then all of a sudden start having kids. It's like, you got to plan for that to make sure you're settled, and then they're going to be settled and taken care of.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
That is just so important. Speaking, like you were saying, being on the same page, are there any scriptures that you guys really stand on or use in terms of your marriage relationship? Is there one that you kind of always go back to, and what's that about?
Yeah, my favorite is Happy Wife, Happy Life. It's in there somewhere, right? No, I'm kidding. Sorry, I've been waiting for like a week and a half to tell that joke. Sorry, that's really bad. I'm not even going to tell you about that. Sorry. I think I can't really.
It's a true statement, though.
Right, it is. Yeah,
It's
another great piece of advice that I was given many times. I think don't go to bed angry. I mean, that's not exactly verbatim, but I think that's a big one. Like if there's an issue, like it's got to be, again, communicated. It's got to be worked out, preferably right away. We had talked a little bit ago about the golden rule. Like we treat others how we want to be treated. That's a big one. Yeah, I just read one this morning, and I'll think of it here in a second.
Yeah. Well, it's like God made Eve for a helpmate for Adam. So it's like when I see him struggling or whatever, and he's not a good communicator, it's brings out the person in me who's like, hey, what's going on? I'm here to help you. You got to talk about it, or you're going to blow up. You can't keep stuff bottled in. So just again, it's like communication is so what you need.
Keeping those lines open at all times.
Yeah. And another thing I was going to say earlier when you were asking about work is, it was quite different, obviously, pre-COVID, because I would have the commute back home. So, I think it's pretty easy to have a tough day at work, right? Like we've all had those days. But one of my goals is to, when I come home, is to not let Jen or the kids see that I had a bad day at work. That was a piece of advice that I was given a long time ago by someone else. It's like, hey, you live one life, but maybe there's some way that you can like disconnect from work and to home. So that was a really big piece of advice that I was given. So if I've had a particularly bad day, like I know I can go to Jen and I can say, hey, I had a tough day. I need like 5 minutes. And it was different because like pre-COVID, I could take that drive and I could
De-stress.
Cool off and de-stress a little bit. Now it's like 10 seconds walking from upstairs to downstairs. It's like upstairs I had a really bad day. Now I'm downstairs. I had like 10 seconds. So I've been doing my workouts. I like work and then I work out and then I'm at home. And sometimes put in both headphones and turn up the music a little bit and get. But we were talking a little bit earlier too about like having just some you time. I think that's so important. I think so many people go right from work and dive right into home and bring all the issues from work into the home life. And I think it's so important to have like a little disconnect there, and to give yourself a little bit of disconnect. Yeah.
So you're saying that even though you're married, you're having those moments alone by yourself to kind of figure out where you're at individually and then come back together, and then also, like you said, Jen, you're acknowledging the fact that when you see something, in Phil, like express your emotions and you're open to it and saying, yeah, I'm going through this, let's connect, let's communicate about it to, make our marriage, stronger. I think that's really, really a beautiful trait.
Like just what we're going through right now, what personally is just like, I need to know what he's thinking, or else it's just all me and I feel awkward, and like I don't want to make a decision by myself as far as what to do with our family, and it's just getting him to communicate. And so we had a recent conversation where I had to say, hey, you're on your phone a lot and all day, and can we do so you can, when you're done with work, you can be off your phone, if we have to stick it in a drawer or hide it somewhere, just to be unplugged when you're at home, because, you're passing the phone and you're clicking it to see if you got any messages, and it's just not necessary. And so we've talked about stuff like that, so it's just being able to communicate.
Yeah. And she did it in a great fashion too. It wasn't, hey, you are terrible at this. You need to really, this really needs to change. It was, hey, we can tell. And, my phone's on silent after 4 or 5, 4:35, whenever I'm done. But she was right. I would walk by and I would, sit it and see if any text messages came in, and, then go about my merry way. But then, it kind of takes my...
You're not focused.
Right, it takes my attention off the family, and now I'm focused on my phone again.
Yeah.
So she didn't yell at me about it, but it was, and she knows that I don't respond well to yelling, and so it's like, hey, she's like, hey, calmly, let's figure out a way to adjust
I think
it.
that's so important for couples to understand, is how did the other person respond? And I think your tone matters a lot. We figured that out early in our marriage.
Right.
Is that tone matters. So, but real quickly, we got about a minute left. What are some key things that you guys could give to people who are aspiring to get married, or married, maybe dating or courting? What are some key tips that you can give to them?
Well, like we talked about before, you got to love yourself first, put God first, and when you do get married, definitely establish, hey, we always got to communicate no matter what. I think that really helps.
Yeah, we've talked about this a couple times, but again, be clear about the path that you're on, know where you're going. Also, a big one that I've learned is don't look for someone who can make you happy. Only you can make you happy. I think that was. I think a lot of people run into that trap where, hey, I'm going to look for someone who can make me really, really happy. And it doesn't work out that way. Yeah. Being a better version of you, especially for your kids, reflecting Jesus in no matter where you go and who you talk to, putting love first.
Having goals with each other.
Goals and knowing
Something
where you're going.
that you can look forward to together, setting time apart for yourselves. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Well, that is just awesome.
Well, thank you guys so much for joining us today. It was a wonderful pleasure having you guys on the show. And we want to say a prayer right quick before we head out.
All
Well,
right.
Father, we thank you for this time together. We thank you again for Phil and Jen and the wisdom that they are able to share today. And I thank you that this wisdom can go out there and help couples, help people in their lives and in their marriages. And I just thank you, Father, for this in Jesus' name. Amen, and amen.
Amen.
Well, thank you guys so much again for joining us. It was a pleasure being here today and having this conversation, and we pray that you could take these principles that we learned today and apply them to your life. God bless you, and we'll see you next time.